Good morning, everybody. Everyone's just kind of piling in from the waiting room. Thanks for waiting around for us. We like getting started right on time. So here we are, 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time, and we're about to venture off into the world of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint with my friend John Anderson. We're going to have a great time, learn a ton. But first, I just have a few housekeeping things I want to cover before we get started. First and foremost, if you have any questions throughout the session, we ask you just pop them in the chat. I will be keeping an eye on that throughout the session and getting them to John throughout the training and then at the end during Q&A. And then secondly, if you are interested in getting that coffee gift card, a reminder, you needed to have registered with a valid school or government email address, so like a .gov, .edu, something like that. And you need to stick around until the end and do the exit survey to qualify. But once you do that, we'll send out your gift card within a day or two as a thank you for joining us. And we are very happy to have you here. And that is all I have. I'm going to pass it over to John to really get us kicked off.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Kate. As she said, we're here today to talk about securing your devices with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And the agenda today is pretty straightforward. Quick introductions, and then we're going to kind of jump into an overview of Defender for Endpoint's features. We'll have lots of demos, showing the endpoint portal, showing what some of the tools look like, how you configure them, what the end user experience is. And then we've got time at the end slotted for Q&A. But definitely, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat, and we can stop and answer as we go along too. So as Kate mentioned, my name is John Anderson. I'm a senior systems consultant here at Trafera. I've got 15 plus years of experience in the Microsoft consulting game, I guess you'd say. It's primarily been configuration manager, Active Directory in the past, but these days it's a lot more cloud, Entra, Intune, especially Defender with all the focus on security these days. We've got the certifications there, and like I said, specialize in Microsoft management and security tools. I am part of Trafera's professional services team, so if you see anything that interests you in the presentation today that you think you'd like to have a more in-depth discussion about, definitely reach out to us, and we'd love to set up a call to chat. So when we talk about Microsoft Defender, there's a lot more to it than most people tend to think of. There's kind of all these different tools that Microsoft has available, Defender for Cloud, Sentinel, all of the new Copilot AI stuff that they've been adding. But today we're going to talk about kind of a subset of these tools. So the tool that most people think of when they think of Defender is just Microsoft Defender in Windows. So this is the antivirus that's just built into the operating system, both workstation and server operating system. It's also your Windows firewall, and some additional features like Defender application control, which you may know from the past as App Locker, and also Defender Smart Screen features. But then on top of the Defender in Windows, there's Defender XDR, which is Microsoft's XDR's extended detection and response. It's effectively their EDR XDR solution, which that itself is composed of a few different features. There's a Defender for Office, Defender for Identity, Cloud Apps. We're specifically going to focus today, though, on just Defender for Endpoint, which is the protection for your devices. And then within Defender for Endpoint, you kind of have that feature broken down into three main sections, I guess I'd say. So the first section is prevention. So Defender for Endpoint has tools like attack surface reduction rules, device control policies, network protection, tamper protection, even web protection, all tools that we can put in place to try to prevent threats from ever executing on our devices in the first place. We also have detection features. So things like advanced hunting queries, automatic discovery of devices on the network, unknown devices, custom indicators we can set up for files or network threats to look for, and a whole vulnerability management tool that can shed light on what are the vulnerabilities in our environment and how can we remediate or take action to close up or reduce that attack surface or that attack surface area. And then we also have response features. So we definitely, want to try our best to prevent any sort of a threat from getting through onto the network, but it does happen. And in that case, you want a robust, set of response features, which I think Defender for Endpoint does have. So we've got automated investigation and response actions, automatic collection of like investigation packages and evidence, uh, the ability to take actions on devices, things like kicking off AV scans, isolating the device from the network, restricting app execution on devices, even generating live response sessions into devices where we can connect in and take actions without having to physically go to the device or establish a more traditional remote connection. So all sorts of tools, which we'll dive into in more detail in a demo in a little bit here. Before we do that, though, I want to talk about everyone's favorite topic, Microsoft licensing, I'm sure. I will want to preface this by saying I am not an expert in this area, as I feel few people are. So if you have more detailed questions about your Defender licensing, I would recommend going to your licensing provider and having a discussion with them. We also can, figure things out to an extent. So I'd be happy to have a more in-depth call with any of you as well to kind of talk through the details of the licensing. But I'm just going to give a quick overview here. So the main license we're going to be talking about is Defender for Endpoint licensing, and that's broken down into a Plan 1 license and a Plan 2 license. So the Plan 1 license is basically just the built-in Defender that we talked about in Windows with a few additional features added on top. Some things like the enhanced attack surface reduction rules, the tamper protection policies, things like that, and then the ability to onboard the devices into Microsoft's Security Admin Center and get things like email reporting, that type of thing. So I do want to say, though, this is not the EDR solution. Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 is just pretty much basic antivirus with a few extra tools. So if you have a security audit or maybe like cybersecurity insurance requirements that require an EDR solution, that's where you need to get Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. So that has all the features of Plan 1, but it adds on all of the automated actions, the EDR features, 6 months of data that you can keep and search through for alerts, the core of the vulnerability management add-on, all the advanced hunting queries. So just way more rich features and information that you have access to with the Plan 2 license. And if you're looking at bundled licenses, Plan 1 would come with your A3 or E3 licensing, and Plan 2 would come with your A5 or E5 licensing. But they both can be bought standalone as well. So then one feature I wanted to highlight within Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, there's the Vulnerability Management Core. So that gives you a bunch of vulnerability information about your devices. So things like, again, discovery of devices on your network, assessments of vulnerabilities on devices, and recommendations about how to remediate those vulnerabilities. And then there's also an add-on you can buy for Defender Vulnerability Management, the premium add-on, that adds a bunch more features like inventorying of browser add-ons, certificates, firmware and BIOS configurations on devices. But the premium add-on here is an additional add-on on top of the Plan 2 license. And I'm just calling these out because in my demo today, I will be using features that kind of come from all of these different licenses. And I didn't want to get into exactly what's part of what, but just be aware of that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is there's separate licensing when we're talking about Defender for servers. So all the licensing I just talked about applies to workstation devices. Servers have their own separate Defender for Servers Plan 1 and Defender for Servers Plan 2. Both of these include Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, but then have additional features above and beyond those. But server is going to be a little bit out of scope for today's presentation. I just wanted to call it out that it is a separate license. And then when it comes to assigning licenses, and I'm talking again about workstation licenses here, there's a few options available. So you can either choose to just apply all Plan 1 or Plan 2 licenses to your devices, but more commonly, I'll see people do the mixed mode licensing, where you would choose to assign maybe a certain number of plan 2 licenses to more high criticality devices. And then maybe you just have some less critical devices that you have plan 1 assigned to. So those can be targeted based on like device tag, device name, OS, and I'll show a demo of that in a minute here. And then there's also device tagging that I wanted to call out as a slide here. Again, I'll do a demo of it, but tagging your devices is very useful for kind of sorting them and being able to apply things and take actions. And there's several ways to do that here. Again, I'll do a demo, but just wanted to call it out on the slide. And finally, device onboarding. There's several ways to get devices into Defender for Endpoint. We'll be looking at this in a demo shortly as well. But I did want to call out here, the Intune connector is going to be the best way to onboard your devices if you have Intune set up. It's very easy. There's just a behind the scenes connection that can get set up. But if you don't have that, you can also use Microsoft's configuration manager tool, or just download a local script and deploy it through group policy, or maybe if you have some sort of a third-party device management tool. But lots of options for getting that out there. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick look at the Security Admin Center. I guess before I jump into this too, any questions in the chat there yet, Kate?
None so far.
Okay, excellent. So what we're seeing now is the Security Admin Center, so security.microsoft.com. And this is kind of your hub for all things Defender, all things security in Microsoft's cloud. And I kind of wanted to call out a few main sections of this. We're not going to have time today to go through the whole portal, as there's a ton of stuff in here, but we'll cover the main things. So if we go down here under System and Settings, and then Endpoints and Onboarding. So this is where most people will start, is getting devices into Defender for Endpoint. And this is where I talked about, you have drop-down menu here where you can say, what type of OS am I trying to onboard? So things from Windows Workstation and Server, even Mac or Linux Server or mobile devices. And then when you're downloading that, how do you want to do the onboarding? With a local script, group policy, configuration manager, Intune, maybe VDI devices. You have lots of options. So you'd select your option, download the onboarding package, and then you can go ahead and deploy that onboarding package through your preferred tool. But like I said, Intune makes it the easiest. So within the portal here, actually under Advanced Features, you'll find a setting called Microsoft Intune Connection. And if you turn that setting on, it actually sets up a connection on the back end to your Intune portal. So we can go over here to the Intune portal and go into tenant administration. And then go to connectors and tokens and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And we can see here the connection has been enabled in my environment. And then we can choose to, apply security policies, sync certain devices. So I'm just connecting, Windows devices here in this case, but you can also do Android, iOS, etc. So once this connection is set up, you can then go into endpoint security and the endpoint detection and response item. And this is where you can create that automated onboarding policy. So you can see I already have one created here. And if we look at it, the settings are very basic. We're just saying automatically onboard from the connector. So I don't have to monitor, I don't have to manage an onboarding package or anything. It's all just done for me right in here. Okay, so that's onboarding the devices. Once you get them onboarded, the next question is usually the licensing for the devices. So actually for that, I'm going to jump over to this other portal here. So again, you can go to settings, endpoints, and then licenses. And here you'll get a count of how many Plan 1 and Plan 2 licenses you have and how many are being actively used. And then you have this option here to manage your subscription settings. And this is where you can choose to apply just Plan 1 or just Plan 2, or apply those licenses in a mixed mode. And with the mixed mode, you would create a rule where you would say apply Plan 1 licenses to all devices where maybe their device name starts with some certain value, or they have a certain tag, or a certain OS platform, right? And then the license would be assigned based on those conditions. So I just mentioned the device tag there too. That's another thing I mentioned is the device tag can be very important because it's very good for targeting things like that. And device tags can be set up in here as well under settings, endpoints, and then, settings, Defender XDR, and then the asset rule management. So you can create a new rule in here. And again, you could say maybe select all devices where the device name starts with, and in my example, maybe I have all my district office devices start with DO dash. So I could say find all those devices and then assign them all a tag of district office. So that will automatically go out and tag all those devices with that tag. If you don't have a great way to target with this automatic rule, there's also other ways to set the tag. So for instance, back over in Intune, you could go to your configuration profiles and create a custom configuration profile where you set an OMA URI value. And it's this device vendor Microsoft advanced threat protection value, which I have on the slide that I showed earlier. And then you can put in whatever you want the tag to be here. So I could say maybe the tag here is district office. And then I could deploy this policy out to groups that I have in Intune of devices and have them be assigned that way. It's also settable just via a registry key. So if you have some sort of other systems management tool, again, you can just do the tag with a registry key. And that's also on that slide that I shared earlier. And then the final way to tag a device is to actually just go to the device that's enrolled into Defender here. So if I go to my assets and devices and click into a device, up at the top here, you have a bunch of actions you can take on the device, and one of them is manage tags. So I could just go here and select from an existing tag or type a new tag that I want to assign to this device. So I could just assign it right here. So several options for doing the tags. And again, I would recommend doing that because it can be really helpful for targeting and sorting and reporting on devices. Okay, so then once you have the tags created, the next thing I like to do is create some groups of devices. So back down in settings here, under endpoints, you have device groups. And you can create a device group. So for example, I could create a device group that's all workstations. And then I can set a remediation level for that group. So I could say maybe I'm creating a group, like a small subset of group that I need to do like a semi-automated remediation on. But in general, I'm going to want to turn full remediation on, right? I want Defender to be able to fully remediate actions automatically without needing my approval for every little thing. I go next and create a query to say how to identify all my workstations. Again, maybe I could do a query based on the tag if I have a tag set. Or in this case, I could just do an OS. I could say all Windows 10 and Windows 11 devices are going to be in my workstations. And maybe I could create a separate one for servers where I select all the server builds. So then I could go next and do a show preview where it'll find devices. I can see there's a whole bunch of, or 6 devices in my lab environment that'll be identified as workstations. And then I can go through and assign, role-based administration to that all workstations group. And then create. And now I've got an all workstations group that has full remediation set. So definitely use the groups if you want to, control the remediation settings in different ways on different groups of devices. The last thing I want to mention just in the settings area here is email notifications. So you can set up email notifications for alerts, vulnerabilities. There's also email notifications for incidents, actions that are taken, threat analytics. So all sorts of email notifications that are available in here. I'd recommend just setting them all up with the full, all of the options selected and just kind of see what information you get, and then come back in here and tune them if you find that you're getting, unuseful notifications or too many notifications about certain things. But definitely recommend setting those up. So that's kind of it for the settings I wanted to go through right away. So let's actually jump into more of what you're going to be looking at day to day in here. So if we go under assets again, and then devices, we can see we've got, several devices in my lab environment here. If I click into one, I get a whole bunch of information about that device. So risk level, exposure level, who's logging on, details about the antivirus scans that have been running, just a bunch of general information about the device. And then along the top here, we have a whole bunch of tabs. So incidents and alerts, I can see if there's any antivirus or security related incidents this device has been a part of. Oh, and look, this device has been a part of a ransomware event. So we'll go take a look at that in a little more detail in a minute. We also have the timeline, so we can see a whole bunch of information that's also queryable, right, about what's happening on this device, process creations, file creations and deletions, registry modifications, connections that are made, network connections inbound and outbound, the firewall blocking things, just all sorts of information that's happening about the device. We also see the security policies. So in this case, I'm using Intune to apply security settings to this device, and we see all of those policies listed here. We see security recommendations. So vulnerabilities that are identified on this device that Microsoft recommends remediating. And again, we'll take a more detailed look at these when we look at the vulnerability management. We also get inventories of all the software that's installed on the system. We also get a breakdown of vulnerable components, which I don't have any here in my demo, but if you had a piece of software that maybe included a component that was vulnerable, it'd be listed here. So a common example of this is like a lot of apps will include something like, OpenSSL or something as part of their package, and maybe they haven't been updating that component of their package. That would get called out here. We can also see browser extensions, so inventories of what are people installing for extensions in their browsers, and even certificates that are on the device. So a listing of all the certificates, when they expire, all the details you'd want to know there. We also have a list of discovered vulnerabilities, so all of the different CVEs that apply to this device. We can see what updates it's missing. So this device looks to be missing the July Microsoft updates. On security baselines, I don't have set up right now, but you can also set up security like a security baseline where the device will compare against a baseline like the Microsoft baseline, or maybe like a CIS baseline, and tell you what's in compliance and what's not in compliance. So that's kind of all the base information. But then up at the top here, there's also some options that you have. So actions that you can take against the device. So I mentioned you can tag the device. You can also do things like kicking off an antivirus scan, collecting an investigation package from the device, restricting app execution. So this one would apply a app control policy to the system that would only allow trusted Microsoft apps to run, and it would block all other apps. So that can be a great option to select if, I got an incident about a device where something risky is happening on it, I could come in here and restrict app execution. Or if something even more serious was happening, I could come in here and isolate the device. In this case, the device is totally kicked off the network, both the internal network and the internet. The only connections the device is still allowed to make is out to the Defender security portal, so that we could still take actions against it or unisolate the device. We also have live response sessions that we can do. So this is where we can get in on the back end through a command line without having to do a traditional, remote session or physically going to the device. So for instance, I could get on the device and type processes and get a list of all of the processes that are running on that device right now. I could then go, kill a process or, take further action. I can query files, all that kind of stuff. So nice having just that back end access to the device through the Defender tool. And these live response sessions too are all centrally logged and everything, so you can see, what users are doing what and when, and a whole log of all the commands they ran and everything. So that's a quick look in at just the device page information. Now, something we saw on the device here is that it's involved in this incident. So maybe I want to take a look at that. I could just click through to it from here, but the main page for incidents in Defender is up here on the left under investigation and response, and then incidents and alerts. So if I click into my incidents, an incident is like a large overarching object that may contain many alerts. So you can see this incident includes 89 different alerts. So I can actually click on alerts here if I want to see those all individually, but I can also see them as part of the incident if I click into it. And this one has a whole bunch of stuff in it because I basically ran a like a pen testing script against the device that tried to do a whole bunch of malicious things on a device that was not really fully protected. So some of the stuff got blocked, some of the stuff got through. But when we click into the incident page here, right away you'll see this graph that kind of shows you a bunch of details about the incident. So, what device was involved, and you can actually take actions against the devices from right here. So I can see this device is pretty clearly compromised. I can right click on that device or click on it and then take actions like isolating the device right from the incident page here. If I want to see more details, I can click on things like the processes, and it'll show me here's all the different processes that were running as part of this incident. I can click into those to get more details about those processes that were running. I could also click on, say, the files to see all of the files that were involved in the incident. And we see all sorts of these different malicious looking things here. I could scroll down and say, hey, Mimikatz, that sounds like a bad one, right? We can see it's a hack tool. We can have a link to the virus total page where we can see, yeah, everyone else agrees that it's also a hack tool. Just more information about that file. We can see the users that are involved, in this case, my admin user. So lots of stuff you can click on here. And if you want to see kind of the order things happened in, there's this play attack story over on the left here. If I click on that, it'll start walking through all like the order that Defender detected everything in. And then I can pause this at any point and click into one of these to get more details on it. So you can kind of walk through the whole breach as it happened. If I want to see the alerts specifically, I can click into the alerts tab here and see all the different alerts that were involved with this incident. And then I could go click into one of those alerts. So say this ransomware behavior detected alert. And I get all the details about everything that was happening as part of this, which is going to be a whole bunch of like PowerShell scripts running. If we go down here, we can see all of the different tools and EXEs that were being detected. And we can see some of these were detected and resolved, but some of them are detected and still in the new state, meaning they haven't been resolved. And you can click into any of these to see details about the file that was found. Again, look at the virus total link there. Hash information about the device, if it was remediated or not. So this one had attempted to quarantine it, and the remediation action failed in this case. Over here on the right, we have the alert page, which we can go open the full alert page, but we can also look at recommendations here about what Defender thinks we should be doing about this. I can see it in the timeline. I can manage the alert. Maybe I want to say, okay, I have resolved this, or I want to assign this to a different user who should be taking a look at it. So all sorts of things we can do with the alerting here. If we go back to the main incident page, we can also see a list here of the activities that were taken. So if we, or actually I'll have to go back and look at the action center since I cleared these out. Normally it would show you the automatic attack disruption activities that were taken here. But since it's been a while since I ran this, they've cleared out of here. But if I go over to the action center here and look at the action history, I can see all of the live response actions that were taken. So quarantining files. It automatically disabled my user account and contained my user account because it saw that it was being used to spread ransomware. And then I came in here and I manually contained it, right? So you can click on an alert and choose to undo that alert if it was made in error, say. We'll also see some other local users that got created that it contained. So you can see lots of actions being taken. And then you also see I established that live response section. So even manual actions that are taken show up in here as well. And then finally, back in the incident page again, just a couple other tabs at the top here where you can see all the assets that are involved in an incident. So the devices that were involved in the attack, all the different user accounts that were involved in the attack. And then if you have connections set up into Defender for Identity and Office 365 and like mailboxes and apps and stuff were also affected, you would see those here too. So all sorts of great information, very rich detail on a breach that does happen within the environment. And then I did call out just the Action Center where you can come in and see the actions that were taken and, undo them if needed. Or if you have things set up to require approval, the Action Center is where you'd come in and do those approvals. Beyond the incidents, the next thing I want to look at is the hunting. So maybe you want to go deeper into the data behind the scenes than just what's presented to you in the GUI. There's this advanced hunting node where you can basically query all of this data that's collected and look for specific things. So for instance, I've got some example queries in here where maybe I want to look at, show me just all antivirus detections from the last 30 days. And I run this query, which is written in KQL, by the way. And I get a bunch of results down here. And I can make those results full screen. And I see a whole bunch of virus stuff being detected on my test machine that I ran the pen testing stuff against. You can also make visualizations, charts, and graphs as part of this querying. So all sorts of cool stuff you can get into here. You can even have things in here run automatically for you. So say, for instance, in that incident I was just looking at, I saw a few local accounts were created on the machine and used to do malicious things. So I could have a query, which I've got one written here, that queries all devices and sees if a local user account has been created on the device. And then I could have that say, show me any that were created in the last 1 day. So I run it and I see a couple user accounts that got created. But maybe I want to get alerted about this automatically. I could take this query and say, create a detection rule. I need device ID and report ID in there. And this has IntelliSense too, which will autocomplete things for you. All right, so now I can create a detection rule. And I could call it, detection name would be detect local creation. And I could run that every day, every hour. In this case, I'm just going to run it once a day. And then I can have it send an alert. So user account created, or local user account created. I could have, maybe it generates a medium severity alert. I could assign it a category, maybe suspicious activity, add a description to it. Some created a new user. And then I could say the impacted entity is a device. I could include the device name in the alert that's sent. I could even have automatic actions be taken if this alert's generated. If somebody creates a local user account, I could have it restrict app execution on that device automatically, or do automated things with files and users if those were involved. But in this case, it'd be a device thing. Then I can target that out at my groups of devices or by device tags, or maybe just to all devices. I guess select something here, I guess do all workstations. And then at this point I could create, and now I've got that rule just running once a day, looking for local admin user creation and notifying me if it finds any. So lots of powerful stuff you can do with the advanced hunting here. And we'll come back to this in a minute to show some audit log stuff we can do with some of the other rules that we'll set up. So last couple things to call out in here is under the endpoints and then vulnerability management, you have that whole vulnerability management suite I was talking about. So there's a dashboard, which just gives you, all sorts of useful information. But I usually come in here to look at recommendations, and you can see a list of all the things that are recommended to do on devices in your environment. So top recommendations are usually going to be things like updating web browsers, updating Windows. And if we click into that, we can see details about the recommendation. You can see which devices are exposed, which ones haven't patched in this case, which devices do have it installed, the associated CVEs that come along with this recommendation. So Windows updates generally are going to have a lot of them. But it's not just update recommendations either. It's also configuration changes. So for instance, it wants me to block Win32 API calls from Office macros. And then it gives me some remediation options. So it tells me in this case, turn on Defender antivirus and enable an attack surface reduction rule. Or maybe disable autoplay for all drives. In this case, it says, well, you can do that by setting this group policy, or you can go create an Intune policy, or you can do it just by setting a registry key. So not only does it give you the recommendations on what to do, but it'll usually give you basically step-by-step instruction on how to actually do the remediation. You can also make an exception for a recommendation too, if you've accepted the risk, or maybe you're remediating this through some third-party tool. So if you create the exception, then the recommendation will also drop out of the list. Beyond the recommendations, there's also inventories again, where you can see the apps and browser extensions and certificates and firmware information collected across all your devices. Again, the list of all of the CVEs that apply to all your different devices. You can click into one of them, again, get a list of devices that are exposed to that particular CVE, see the software that's affected by that CVE. And this is, of course, a searchable list. Event timelines, you can see new vulnerabilities that are added that have been identified that apply to at least one of your devices. And then again, the baseline assessments, where you can create a baseline and say, I want to compare my Windows 11 devices against the CIS Windows 11 benchmark. And then we'll get a listing of devices and if they're compliant with all of the different settings in the CIS benchmark. So very cool. If you don't have the full vulnerability management, if you're just on Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, there is also kind of a stripped down version of it under exposure management, just called Secure Score, which will give you kind of the same information. It'll give you like recommended actions, but just without the full, rich details that are in the vulnerability management. So Secure Score you still have, even if you don't have access to the vulnerability management. And then finally in here, there's just down at the bottom, reports. So there's a bunch of built-in reports you can run that show you information about all sorts of different things in here. So for instance, I could do a device health report, and it'll show me just a bunch of information about my devices, Defender update status, that kind of thing. So again, there's way more to this Security Admin Center than we have time to talk about in the meeting today, but that kind of gives you a quick overview of the main highlights of it. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow here. So now I want to talk about some of the different components of Defender that you can set up to help protect your devices. So the first one, of course, is just Defender antivirus. It's integrated with the operating system. It's got, your behavior analysis, heuristics, cloud-based intelligence, generally, most of the little checkboxes that you find on the like the cybersecurity insurance audits. And you can configure antivirus through Intune, Configuration Manager, or Group Policy. Good options in all three spaces. Again, for all these, Intune is going to be the best way to configure it. Microsoft is kind of adding features first to Intune and then maybe porting them back to older tools, maybe not. So Intune is definitely the way to go if you can. And Defender antivirus, just a quick demo here. It's pretty basic. When it does detect a threat, you'll get notified about it. You can see some information about it. So I've just got an example file here I'm saving that'll be detected as a threat on the device. As soon as I save that file, get a notification from Defender that it found a threat on the device. I can click into that threat and see more details about the actions that are being taken. You can see it, since I clicked into it right away, I actually have an option for actions there, but they quickly disappear as Defender does its automated actions to clean those up. And then the file I saved is no longer there. I can go into the security center on the device and click into the protection history to see details about the threat that got blocked. So in this case, I can see the list to the file and the, how it was detected, the action that was taken. In this case, it was quarantined. Out in the Defender portal, I can see that an alert got generated. And I can click into that to, again, view more details about what exactly happened. So we can see Explorer ran notepad.exe, and then notepad.exe was used to save a file that was identified as malware. And then Defender removed that file or quarantined that file. So that's what the antivirus looks like. There's also the Windows firewall on the system. So this is just, again, integrated with Windows workstation and server operating systems. Just used to monitor incoming and outgoing traffic on the device. Can also be configured through Intune, Configuration Manager, and Group Policy. And let's see, I do want to show you a quick example of the firewall reports. So in the security portal where we are here, there's reports, and there is a firewall report in here, which actually is probably not going to show anything in my demo environment. Let me switch back over to this environment. Ports and firewall. So we can see a bunch of information about like blocked connections that are coming inbound, ports that are being blocked, apps that are being blocked. So a bunch of nice centralized information about what the Windows firewall is actually doing. But then also out in Intune, if you go under your endpoint security and your firewall, there's just a report up at the top here too, which will give you a listing of all the devices in your environment that have the firewall turned off, which you'd be surprised how common it is just to have the firewall turned off on devices. So this is definitely an easy security remediation. All right, back to the slide deck, and I'll go through some of these settings in a minute here too. So the next feature I want to talk about is Defender Smart Screen. So this is a tool Microsoft has that will identify websites and files based on their reputation with Microsoft. So it'll protect users from trying to go to malicious websites or run malicious files on their devices. And it can be configured in warning mode or block mode. If it's in warning mode, the user will get a warning screen and have the option to click through it. If it's in block mode, they're just blocked. And if it's something legitimate they need to get to, you as the tech admin would have to make an exception. Smart Screen is configurable through Intune and Group Policy. And here's a quick demo of what that looks like. So if I'm in my Edge web browser here, and I try to go to a malicious page on a device that's not protected, you can see the page loads right up. Or if I go to a page that has a malicious ad, that ad is not blocked. If I try to download a malicious file, Defender knows it's suspicious and it warns me about it, but it gives me the option to keep it anyways. And then you can see I was able to download it. If I go to a device that does have Smart Screen turned on and I try to go to that same phishing page, I'm right away given this nice red screen that says, hey, this is an unsafe website. And then down at the bottom, you can see I'm blocked from continuing to this site. I don't even have the option to continue along to it since that's how I've configured this. If I go to a site that has a malicious ad, it doesn't block the whole web page, but it'll block just that specific ad on that site. If I try to download a malicious file, it just says, nope, that's a malicious file. You're not able to download it. Jump back to that here. So you can see I would have an option there if I had it in warn mode where they could say keep anyways, and they'd be further warned. But in this case, I have that block. So the keep option is grayed out. So that's Smart Screen, what that looks like. Back to the slide deck. The other thing with Smart Screen is they have this feature called Enhanced Phishing Protection. That's in Windows 11. So it'll track your password hash on the device. And if the user say types their password in plain text into like a Word document or a OneNote document, or maybe out even onto the web, it'll pop up a box on the screen saying, hey, you probably shouldn't be typing your password in plain text. I can also check to see if they're reusing the same password in many sites and pop up a warning for that as well. So definitely cool password protection features. And then very similar to Smart Screen is network protection. It's basically Smart Screen, but it also extends to third-party browsers like Chrome and Firefox, or even connections that are happening at the system level through like PowerShell. So Smart Screen itself is limited to just Edge and the Windows operating system. Network protection works on all the other browsers. And network protection is also configurable through Intune, Configuration Manager, and Group Policy. I don't have a demo of the network protection configuration, but basically what happens is you try to go to one of those same phishing websites in Chrome, and it would just give you a connection reset page. So it doesn't give you the nice red, smart screen page like an Edge. So it can be more confusing to the end user, but it does still at least protect the end user from that malicious web page or malicious download. The next thing I want to talk about is attack surface reduction rules. So these are some of the first things I'll actually set up when I'm working with a client to set up like a Defender implementation with more of the advanced features. I think attack surface reduction rules are some of the easiest things to turn on and also provide the most benefit. So they do all sorts of things to protect against kind of like unusual or risky behavior on your device. Things like running obfuscated scripts, having WMI do process creation or running things from PSExec, untrusted processes running from like a flash drive. It has the advanced ransomware protection and a whole bunch more things, protection against rebooting the device into safe mode, unsigned drivers, that kind of thing. And these rules can also be all configured through Intune, ConfigMan, or Group Policy. And a quick demo here. So we're going to do a few demos in a row of trying to ransomware a device. So in this case, I've got a device that's not protected. And I've got a file here, my important information text file that contains important information. And I've got my downloads folder where I've downloaded ransomware.exe. And I think it's a good idea to run that. And of course, my files have now been encrypted and I have to pay Bitcoins to get them back. If I go into the file, yep, I can see it's all been encrypted. I try to open the text file and it's just a bunch of garbled nonsense. So darn. So I'm going to switch over here then to my device that's protected by attack surface reduction rules. And I've got the same thing. I've got my important information text file. And I've also got my ransomware exe that I'm going to run. But in this case, it doesn't run. It's been blocked. And if I go back to my folder, I can see that my files are still in the way that I left them, not encrypted. And if I go into the security center on the device, I can see protection history that a risky action was blocked. And I can see it was the attack surface reduction rule use advanced protection against ransomware. And the affected item was my ransomware exe in my downloads folder. And I'd also get an alert about this in the Defender security portal as well. Another useful feature is controlled folder access. So this tries to protect folders in your user folders and system folders specifically from having executables modify them. So things like ransomware. This is also configurable through Intune, ConfigMan, and Group Policy. And just a quick look at how that works. So basically the same thing again here. I've got my unprotected device with the important information text file. I can run an executable here to try to modify a file in that folder that's protected. So my C demo folder. I try to run it, and that exe is able to create a file in there. And then I can also maybe run some ransomware on my device. And it looks like it's able just to go through and execute. And if I go into my demo folder, yep, my files have all been encrypted again. So if I jump over to a device that's now protected by controlled folder access, if I run the same tool to try to create a file in that folder with an executable, the tool just exits and the file is not created. Again, I can also try to run ransomware on the device. Oh yeah, you can see I'm getting notified there from Defender that it blocked the CFA tool. If I also try to run the ransomware executable, that also doesn't execute properly. And you see my files are protected. And again, I can go into the security center here and see that Defender did block both of those things, and it blocked it by using controlled folder access. And then finally, in this kind of same vein, we have application control. So this is kind of the evolution of the old app locker policies, where we're saying only trusted applications are able to run on the device. Also configurable through Intune config man and group policy. And what that ends up looking like is this. So again, I've got my important information in my demo folder, and I try to run the ransomware exe, and it encrypts the unprotected device. And if I go over to the protected device and try to do the same thing, it says, no, that's been blocked by app control for business and doesn't let me run it. So right there, you've got kind of three different ways that you can protect your devices, against all sorts of threats, but specifically ransomware. So you can imagine if you had all three of those features turned on your devices, a piece of ransomware has a lot of hurdles it needs to cross to be able to actually execute on your devices. And that's not to discount to just the built-in Defender antivirus that would also try to stop it. So there's a lot of things in the way there. Real quick with the app control policy, I did want to call out, if you're going to configure that, it's a very long and complicated XML file that you need to do to configure it. So I'd recommend using the app control for business wizard, which is an application that Microsoft built to help you automatically configure those policy files. So you can download the installer just if you search for it on the web here. And then when you launch that installer, it'll give you the option to create a policy and then add exceptions to the policy, set it up with a baseline of configurations. But yeah, definitely for app control, recommend using the app control policy wizard. Last couple things to mention: device control policies let you control the device settings on a device, right? So you could block removable storage from plugging into the system. Say people can't use USB drives, or maybe they can use USB drives, but only certain hardware IDs that we've approved in the organization. Same thing with printers, same thing with Bluetooth connections, block them entirely or only allow certain ones. Device control also configurable through Intune and group policy. BitLocker drive encryption, everyone should be familiar with that. It's just encrypting your device, in a way that we want it to be encrypted, not by ransomware, right? So to protect those devices, laptops that get lost or stolen, people can't access the data on them easily. Also configurable through Intune, config man and group policy. And then there's some PowerShell commandlets. Before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to point out in Intune where you can actually configure all these settings. So in Intune, there's this endpoint security node. And this is generally where you have the settings for all the stuff that I've just been talking about. So antivirus, you can create an antivirus policy. And you can see there's all sorts of settings in the antivirus policy. Specifically things like network protection that we were talking about, turning that on, potentially unwanted application protection, scheduled scanning. There's firewall policy, BitLocker policy. Here's where you have that app control policy. And you can see with the app control policy, it's that very long XML file, right, that you don't want to have to configure by hand. So again, recommend using the tool there. You have your attack surface reduction settings. So this is where you can configure attack surface reduction rules, controlled folder access, also the device protection. If I click into my attack surface reduction rules, you can see I can configure all the different rules that are here in audit mode, block mode, warn mode. So for most of these tools that I'm showing here, I'd recommend setting them up initially in audit mode and then looking at those audit logs before eventually turning them on in block mode. And the easy way to do that is back over in the security portal. If you go back into the hunting area here, you can create queries to look at audit logs for the different tools. So for example, I've got some attack surface reduction rule queries here. And say, show me all attack surface reduction rule detections for the last 7 days. So then it gives me a big list back, and I can see the action type is, process audited or process blocked, because I had some of the rules turned on in block mode. But I'd be able to look through these audit logs and see, well, what is getting audited and by what rule? And is that something that I'd actually want to block? In this case, yes, I think ransomware.exe is probably something I'd want to block. But if it was something that was maybe legitimate that you didn't want a rule to block, that's where you could come back over to Defender and then create exclusions for those things. So I could come into the rule here, find the rule that was generating the alert, and then I could add an exclusion to say, don't or allow, this folder through the attack surface reduction rule. Don't block things that are in it, or this executable or process or whatever. So generally in Intune, configure your antivirus stuff in this endpoint security node and start off with it configured in audit mode, and then use your advanced hunting queries to query those audit log entries. And then once you kind of have all the audit logs cleaned up, use Intune to switch those tools into block mode. And then you'll satisfy the recommendations in the vulnerability management. So then the last thing I wanted to talk about is there's just a few PowerShell commandlets you can run locally on a device to get information if you're trying to do kind of testing or troubleshooting. So things like get MP computer status will just give you a bunch of the antivirus information about the device. Get MP preference will show you all of the antivirus settings that are currently configured, things like attack surface reduction rules, controlled folder access. And threat detection will give you recent threats that are detected on the device. So if you're trying to do scripting or automation, these kind of commandlets can be very useful. And then finally, I want to call out testing. So Microsoft has some smart screen pages that you can use to test that. They've also got a whole document on testing Defender for Endpoint. So things like that ransomware exe that I was using, you can find there. And then there's plenty of other pen testing stuff you can find online. One I particularly like is the Atomic Red team. It has a whole GitHub library of pen testing stuff that you can run against devices. So without having to worry about actually ruining your environment. And that's it. Questions or comments? So I know it was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but happy to answer any questions anyone has right away.
All right, we don't have any questions in the chat right away, so I'm going to launch our exit survey so people can take that, have a chance to ask any questions. But thanks again so much, John. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I think we can all walk away feeling like we know a few things that we can do to secure the endpoints in our organization a little bit better with endpoint. So thanks so much for that training. Yeah, so again, if you want to qualify for the coffee, please make sure you take that exit survey before you head out. We have a little bit of time to ask questions. You could put them in the chat. Otherwise, we can just say goodbye and see you next time.
And if you don't get your question answered right now, again, reach out to us. We'd love to, set up a call and talk about your specific situation more in depth.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna put our cameras off, say goodbye, but we'll leave the exit survey and the chat open a little bit longer if anyone wants to ask questions and finish the survey. But thanks again. We will see you next time.